Hello and welcome to our special documentary on Peter Torot. Behind me is the entrance to what used to be known as the Vaninara police station. It was a Japanese prison during the Second World War. Here, Japanese officers Meshida and Gunto would bring their Tolai prisoners for interrogation inside the tunnel. Peter Torot was one of those prisoners. Mother Nature focused world attention on Rabaul and its people when the volcanoes erupted on the 19th of September 1994. Even more attention is focused on one man to be recognized as the first indigenous saint in the South Pacific region.
Mi wan pla pikinini blong Gabriel Telo mi last born blong Peter Torot na long 1945 and Peter Torot in Bindai na 46 and Papamblomi Strait in Bindai na minum bin looking pes blong tupula all sem na mi kama big pala now na mi walk long ting long looking pes blong Papamblomi Strait all sem bin narim all sem one man long up long wunalaga bin gat desola kain pixem long Papamblomi alright min bin gone down ask him try long giving me na emi no like giving me emi like by me giving him some money na emi giving me this la pick some long Papamblomi min bin giving him 10 kina or emi allowed me long kiss him this fella pick some long Papamblomi.
Peter Torot treasured the photograph because it portrayed his father Gabriel Telo, the youngest brother of his uncle Peter Torot the catechist. This photograph was taken in the early 30s, the second of only 2 copies. In our research for this documentary, we stumbled onto the photograph. Until we did, it was the held belief that there was no other existing copy. Our discovery confirmed Michael Titingai's story that the widely publicized portrait of Peter Torot had in fact been taken from the other known copy of the group photograph.
Only inside lang sila photo. Time only kisim da sila picture lang Torot. Only writing long pencil na only Macintosh long Macintosh Torot na triple mania.
The photograph given to the missionaries belonged to Pio Turmelat, the man said to have dressed Peter Torot for this historical snapshot. According to Michael, the picture was taken in a Chinese studio somewhere along the Mango Avenue in Rabaul.
Na después foto ikam long kander blomi kimi plalong en. Oli foto vantem Peter and Torot na tupla kander blomi na tupla brada. Telo na Torot. Oli sindan vantem.
On the 26th of August 94, we visited Pio Turmelat at Raluan Namatu village only hours before his death. Little did we realize that he was the same Turmelat in the photo. The original owner of the photograph, To Varto, was Torot's hairdresser. This was Rakunai village on the 3rd day of the Rabaul volcanic eruptions in 1994. It doesn't look it, but Rakunai means grassland in the local Kwanwa language. It was there that the history of the first Papua New Guinean saint began 83 years ago, in 1912, when Peter Torot was born as the third child to Angela Topuya and Maria Yetumul. In his documented testimonies, parish priest of Rakunai and close friend of the family, Father Karl Laufer, recalls thus.
In 1898, there was a spectacular baptism ceremony in Malagunan. The first adults from Rakunai were received into the church at this time and received their spiritual rebirth through the sacrament. One of the chiefs to be baptized was Topuya, the father of Torot.
A more explicit testimony came from John To Varto, who knew the family well.
Peter Torot's father was one of the big important persons in the village. In local language, he was a Petuana or Luluai, that is, a local chief. At the time of Peter Torot's birth, his father Topuya was also a mayor of Rakunai. Torot's mother was a quiet, gentle woman committed to the education and general good of her children. They were a good Catholic family.
When the story and testimonies about Peter Torot were documented, only the eldest sister and brother, Teresia Yawarpilak and Joseph Tatamai, were alive. They have all since died.
Our father was Angelo Topuya and our mother was Maria Yetumul. Papa was a clan leader. He was very caring and looked after us. He gave us a lot of good advice and taught us many things we needed to know.
Over the rise is the Rakunai Community School. Of course, it wasn't as big as it is today when Peter Torot enrolled as a child. The classrooms then were built of bush material and the school ground much smaller. His teacher was the local priest of Rakunai, Father Karl Laufer, who was assisted by the catechists. In school, Torot stood out as a bright lad with good conduct. Outside school, he was the boys' leader in work and games. So it was that he was admitted early to receive his first Holy Communion. Impressed with Torot, Father Karl Laufer asked Angela Topuya if his son could become a priest. To that, Topuya replied thus,
No, Father. I don't believe that one of our generation is ready to be a priest. It is too early for that. Perhaps one of my grandchildren or great-grandchildren will be that lucky. But if you want Torot to be a catechist, please send him to the catechist school at Taliligap.
And so Torot was enrolled at the Taliligap Catechist School in 1930. Records of his achievements show yet again that he was of outstanding character. All these were summed up by none other than one of his own classmates, Simon Topaloa.
Me play stop one time long school. That's all me sabe long passing long Torot. And me one play good play man through. Ino sabe long tok cross na one kind something all the same. And me sabe mari long all nara play man. Ino sabe cross long one play man. Ah, all right. And walk blangan. Na me play stop na me play poroman one time. Ah.
Topalawa passed out from Taliligap as a catechist and was posted to Kilenge in West New Britain.
Time big play come up. Me walk catechist long Kilenge. Now all siya pantu stopping me finish. Only stopping me finish me no can make him lotu. No good babali cut him neck blow me. Now me talk man sorry. Me no pray him knife blow you. Me sabe suppose you kill me now. Now that's all me go to heaven.
Simon Topalawa has long gone past the retirement age and has settled permanently at Bitagali village on the Gazelle Peninsula. Unlike old people of his age, Topalawa still enjoys his outings. With the help of a walking stick to keep him on his feet, He's not allowed his old age to discourage him and makes use of every opportunity to carry on with his calling as a catechist.
Me play asking you long all days, pala. You make him strong, me pala. By me play make him good all walk long me pala. But by life blow me pala long ground. And me good pala. Na help him sit down blow me pala. Na help him all walk blong. Make him ready him soul blow me pala. Long place down. Me play asking you. Long name belong Jesus Christ, and me Lord belong me pala. Amen.
The young at heart are some of his keen listeners. They eagerly join him for lessons on the bread of life. He easily commands the respect, as he does the adults, for his forthright honesty and simplicity. Simon Topalawa, one of the few pioneer catechists still alive, who were students at the Taliligab Catechist Training Center, survived the Second World War and the 1994 volcanic eruptions. The St. Paul's Catechist Training College at Taliligab was a big center. It was also known as a double school because it had a primary school where the trainee catechists did their practical. Peter Torot did not remain long at the catechist school because his parish priest at Rakunai needed him. He called him back before the end of his third year. He obeyed and returned home at the beginning of 1933 and was installed as the youngest catechist. His main occupation was to teach at the mission school where he was once a pupil.
Sila kelas mi stop, emi ya sami ken koli mo sense siksa, asami pala stop no sila rumia, mina to lemeusia. Stop Gabriel Lemmy, Opinis, na Tokova stop. Looking long in no good play one line on the class.
John Tokeleto is a nephew of Peter Torot, the firstborn of Torot's sister, Teresa Yobarpila.
Long this pila time, boy no come here. So I can school in no school of English. School that's a long book tambuna. That's 6 months and go to Sati.
Torot became very popular amongst his own people right from the time he began his commission as a catechist. In his spare time, he would visit the people and especially the sick. Eyewitness accounts state that Torot was often seen praying alone on the farm and at the church, attended every divine service, and received Holy Communion daily.
I came to know Peter Torot soon after he was installed as a catechist at Rakunai. Because my mother, Iena Lili, was from that place, I went to live there and attended classes in Torot's mission school. And later, when the bride price was paid, I became engaged to him.
Paula Yavarpit was born on the 27th of June 1920 at Ramalmal. When she was 14 years of age, she left her parents and went to live in a mother's village at Rakunai. There she was enrolled in the primary school and became one of Peter Torot's pupils. One morning it was announced that the bride price, 50 coils of mussel shells, had been paid for Paula Yabarpit to be promised in marriage to Peter Torot. On the 11th of November 1936, Torot married Paula Yabarpit in a wedding ceremony witnessed by the community at the Rakunai parish.
Mama blumi evan pla good pla Mary. Inusa koros itru olsem. Sobos ma mi biket longen no usati biket longen en baim tok lik. Na sobos olsem nogat koros o minom biket longen. En bay nablo tok en bay stapi sitason.
Rufina Yamama is Peter Torot's second of 3 children. She was 3 years old when her father Peter Torot was killed. She is the only survivor of the family.
And mama blemis a story olsem tok. Papa evan pla good pla mantru. And we can look him all visitors only long house in an apple passing plus something long on. And must give him something. Look lo money wo come out long road and must kiss him me come long house. Cook him kai give him mem. In an long cross long holman lo peles no got through. And walk belong in tasolo walk bloloto.
The Japanese landed on the Gazelle Peninsula on January the 23rd, 1942. 2 days later, they arrived at the Catholic mission headquarters at Vunapope. The work of the missionaries continued regardless, but by October of the same year, all the missionaries were ordered into strict internment. When heavy shelling by the Allied forces destroyed the station, the Japanese then moved the missionaries to Ramallah. There they were to remain for more than a year. Their status had changed from being missionaries to prisoners. The priests and sisters were all bunched up together at Ramallah with a group of mixed-race students. In his book, This Crowd Beats Us All, by the Bishop of Rabaul, Leo Sharma, he records his images of Ramallah when he was a prisoner there.
In the beginning, there was nothing except virgin forest in Ramallah camp, a real jungle. Wonderful giant trees formed a dense canopy over the whole compound. It was impossible for us to be seen from the air. The undergrowth had been cut away to make room for the different residents. Before we were allowed to descend into the deep gorge, we had to be counted again. Some of us, for whom it was the first experience in jungle life, gazed despondently into the gloomy depths of the chasm.
And in this valley here, they started to dig the tunnels. We have 6 big tunnels here for the fathers, brothers, sisters, and for the seminarians. Besides that, we have quite a few tunnels here for the mixed race people who were living here at that time. There were nearly between 300 and 400 people were living here in this area.
That time all Japanese Karabusim all missionary give me one and kind talk with all catechists.
All missionary only talk. Olim walk blang yupla. Yupla olim walk blang yupla. Na mi pala ego. Oli Karabusim mi pala now. All right. Mi pala stop. Na enough long days pala time. All Japan, only come now, only stopping me pala now. Only stopping me, but by me no can make him walk long low to now.
Now in the late 70s, Sister Monica is still in the order of the FMI sisters at Vunapope. She was a young sister and lived at Takabur when the war broke out. She still remembers the priests and sisters at the Ramallah concentration camp.
Ramallah. Big pala verdi ya, nami pala bokong panta pelongin, pelong bringin kai na olong kita something belong ol pasperia, olino sa gua sa long kisimban pala something, ni pala ol pemai sister ya ni pala saran bringin ol kai belong ol ya, na something only like him.
And one interesting story was that the sisters were not allowed to enter, of course, the camp, and Christmas was coming close to, and they had the chance to get a letter through to the bishop, and they asked him if it would be possible that he could say mass for them. He tried several times to get permission. He asked them first, the Japanese, if it would be possible that the sisters would come into the camp for Christmas, but that was refused. The second proposal he had was if he would be allowed to get out to say mass for them. That was refused too. And then he decided they probably could not ignore his third proposal, and that was if they were able to come close to the fence and he would say mass then inside the camp and the sisters would be standing outside. And that permission was finally given. And he told them at the same time to the Japanese that it's a common tradition that the bishop would shake hands with all the sisters on a day like that. And then he even had the chance to give them Holy Communion through the fence.
One of the priests held prisoner at Ramallah was Father Karl Laufer, the parish priest from Rakunai. As far away as it was from Rakunai, it was no bother for Peter Torot. It is documented that Torot organized food from his people and brought them to Ramale. The testimony of Father Laufer about those meetings with Peter Torot were recorded.
The news he imparted about conditions outside was anything but joyful. He himself needed consolation and guidance. In the early morning hours, he assisted at my Holy Mass, communicated, and then took the Blessed Sacrament with him to the sick and dying. These forbidden visits were often repeated, and he never came empty-handed.
Father Laufer's testimonies match those of George To Vaninara, a nephew of Torot.
Time lang kasi most here. Saya kisim di selambanis, kerana pintu pula tinggal lang. Saya kisim most here lang, and gimol. Después lagi ko saya kisim lang pope, lang Ramale, all Japanese all padre all bin karabus. Close to now itampu long at man mo igolong all padre. And we finish long this la. Time we play come down. You know mga komunyon mo gato hostia long dim long money got sick.
To Vaninara and his elder brother John Tocoleto are nephews of Torot. Their mother, Teresa Yebarpilak, was the eldest sister of Torot. In August 1994, they called their wives and children, and together they made a pilgrim to Taogo, the camp where Peter Torot and his family lived during the war. Tocoleto was a young lad at the time and has not forgotten the layout of his childhood playground.
Time now you had now long fight, me play put down, and me come down now. He comes in down long place, and now me sit down long. A mall belong in Yana. House belong in Yana, me tap. Two plarong belong in one play, no. You know, put him back long and na platasali. Gaslip long and
Tocoleto led us to the dugout tunnel on the hillside used by Peter Torot. It was still intact. Inside one of the tunnels was a shelf dug out into the wall of the tunnel. As Tocoleto explained, Torot kept the Blessed Sacrament there. He also kept a lamp glowing beside it day and night. The tunnel, there were others for his brothers and relatives, were their shelter against air attacks. Torot kept his Holy Communion hidden inside his tunnel, especially when the Japanese tightened their grip on the freedom of the people, and particularly the activities of the church. As a catechist, Torot was alone at Rakunai. One of his most testing trials was when he single-handedly confronted the Japanese advance on the school and the mission station. Father Karl Laufer referred to this confrontation in his testimony.
Courageously, he met the incoming Japanese when God and begged that the station be spared. But while he still spoke, a shot rent the air, and in the same moment, machine guns were directed on the evacuated station. The church, the house, and the school were damaged. It was to Torot's luck that in the confusion that followed, he slipped away. From this point on, he felt himself solely responsible for the parish at Rakunai.
This did not discourage him, though. All evidences illustrate that, if anything, he was all the more inspired to carry on the work of the church. He conducted many of his teachings in open-air settings at Taogo, his family camp. He also ventured to other camps where people lived to continue his work.
Emi skuli me pelalong kasikismo, desala kasikismo book belongan no stop now. Diklik book kasikismo. Na liklika ba desala main now mo stop na igatol pixel longan.
Bianin bipo warana sol waranating na. Ambra all sis la picture iban pula page na iwan temol. Hindi sa nang kat mo now. Kasi kismol sem askim metok. Usati mikim god. No, unang kat mani mikim god eman pula solo sem askim long. Olo yang pula limang. Emi skuli mi pula long. Ol mangi ansad long sala auslo to time. Lo to finish. Na lo Friday all Friday sa solo isa mikim puti mi sala nem long ol lik mangi mabay. Ol kisim sampala skul belong. Long lotu. O sem kasi kismo something na buktambu. Na long display, long number one time belong em. Emi go skuli mi pelaken long tok blo siapan. Na sing belong ano sem now. Wala punya oli sing belongan.
It was the beginning of 1945 and the beginning of the trial of Peter Torot.
Binari mo siyem Torot sabi ko kim lo tulong olman na blessing mo manol only like marti mo man na Mary na iwasi mo liklik pikinin ito ol niyo pala pikinin na ol Japanese boklong lukimem na olimpin tambu imem pinis na.
Like Rufine Yamama, Rocco's Terupia could not remember the face of his uncle Peter Torot. He was 5 years old when Torot was killed. Terupia's father was Torot's eldest brother. Every time Torot was summoned to the police, the matter was religion. The very first time was in Rabaul. Lieutenant General Hitosei Imamura cautioned him to restrict church work, giving the excuse that not only was it frustrating his forces from winning the war, but also causing him heavy casualties at the hands of the Allied air raids. The leading enemies of the Rakunai territory were two Japanese officers, Mashida and Gunto. To win local support, they encouraged polygamy, that is, to permit the men to take more than one wife. At the same time, they tried to recruit local girls to become prostitutes.
Rendim na close to Bali wakim tuli mol sala yang pula Mary nambungi mol wantem blong bukim aus pamuk. Ora nare ap tu masik si mol sala na tok ei. Plan pa mol Mary ya. Yang panausan panating na man siapa na kam pudi aus pamuk lan.
In this position document to the Pope concerning the life history of Peter Torot are recorded the testimonies of 26 witnesses. One character featured prominently in this document was Tometapa. Tometapa was the police boy at Vaninara. He was the first man to try to get a second wife for himself, but Torot intervened and left him a very bitter man.
No, Tometapa look him keni marriage mol man kena Mary and olikoti mem ken long ol Japan.
According to the document, Torot was asked if he had officiated at a marriage and prayed with the people. To this, Torot answered, "Yes, I did what was my duty." After he was beaten, he was sentenced to 2 months' imprisonment. Sister Adriana was a young girl when Peter Torot called her to be a nurse to his wife Yepola, who was expecting their third child. At that time, she was simply known as Luisa. Privately, Peter Torot put her in charge of his religious books with these specific instructions.
You look out long house blomi na old book. You look out long en no gutoli bangarapim Bible na book blong baptismo na e paulam ba ino ken luki mem suppose you item paulam ba ingo long narapala right you kisi mem na you item right mi meki mall na mi vokim na mi putim booking on inside long box na mi golong na mi planim.
She was a great comfort to Yepola and Torot's mother, Maria Yetumul. She remained with them and would accompany Yetumul to Wanayara to bring food to Peter Torot.
Narapala time, mingo ken, mama isalimilong kai blongen ken. Na mi bring him kai, na mi tu pelai sindao na tok. Last time ya, long night bauli kilime. Right mi tu pelai sindao na ito kolosem. Luisa ba yung kondao na yung tokimolman yung pelai strong long araring na loto. Nararing ba yung pelai aliwi milongen. Mino sabe long olbik pelandok tamba oli kamya. Mino sabe by mi oli mi kimonem long mi oli kilimi o stemonem. Nambiaen you tokim baratam blomi. Emi las long olia telo. Apikinin blong en Torot ya. Telo. Alright. You tokim em na bring him chiot blomi na cruise blomi na les blomi by kam na sisis na resa by katim kras blomi. Right? Come back na mitokim bratam blongenia na ingo painim bratam blongenia long karambus. Ay bokim.
Kami sta long karambus mi bong tingin ngat pelan di karambus istap ting tri palatasol tu pelamana wandem Torot.
Arap Tobinabak was about 20 years of age when he was imprisoned. He had been accused of stealing tapioca. He is currently a pastor at the Rakunai United Church.
Mi saben go long garden long plan walk long garden. Na Peter Torot Mr. long house cook. Alright, now time. Lik siki kisimem. Alright. All kisimi mi moli puti mi long the solo walk polo Peter Torot long house cook. Alright, Mr. walk long house cook staff. Go now. Enough now. Long time all Japan rendi now long. Ting long Torot. One pala day long afternoon, tu pala siapa ni bin come up na. Long time Peter Torot lik siki kisimem pinis. Na mi pala ista one pala day, tu pala siapa come up na. Salimi siapa bos pala mi pala mi talks mi go kisim Peter Torot long. Api saya silip long enya.
It was late afternoon on that day. Tominabak returned with Torot, and together they waited in the cookhouse, situated somewhere down on the flat.
Nalikam na wan pala siapan lukimi. Na kira we talk. Hey, you know go one time all man go and up. You know Arim. Na mi talk. No. Na emi talk all get of three pala ikam behind finish longen. Na lis kam stand up now long do. Ola toli raus mi na wale talk. You go and up. Mi kirap mi go. All man mi kirap ikam outside. All man stand up in it long do. Right, all give him marasil not Torot. I'll talk me go and up. Me walk about me tani me all same na. Me kalap long letter me look back in go long all.
Arap Tobinabak was the last prisoner to leave the camp and slowly walked up this hill up to the top, but kept looking back because he wanted to see what would happen to Peter Torot.
I only pass him yam belonging lokas. Katen na nus polongen na litoki mem you silip Alright, emi silip. Nulcinda na emi silip, ibrukim lek, olcem na putimun pelahan belangan sem na silip. Alright, listen up. Na papa belum marasin na ikisim ni sa lombel belangan. Alright, emi ilai go trout. I'm already now passing mouse belangan. Alright, I'm now. He died now.
Peter Torot was injected with a lethal drug, after which he never regained consciousness. He passed away quietly late on a certain Friday afternoon in July 1945. News of his death was not broken until the next day, when the Vaninara police camp was awoken with whispers that Torot was dead.
Alright, siapa now? Oliari all night belong all man, only sing out talk and pakati get in the finish. No, only come outside now. Look, long Peter. Alright, all yasikim, hey, kati in the long on him. Now me, he miss a finish, that's all me not like talk out or people like kill him or no got me talk, hey, me no can sabe.
The people at Taugo, Torot's farmstead, were the last to be told. The news sent shockwaves.
Ano ka daw, ikaray? Alino talk about, ikaray. Ino 10 minutes na ka tayo kampula, pinis lang sila, sabi ha. Dami pala bila si Mr. Huli tayo turo na isang na nakatok-tok blongol, unalakol ni sila manikam.
This is the famous gravesite of Peter Torot. When the people came up to retrieve the bones, they made sure they dug 1 foot from the edge of the cement slab to the side so that they did not disturb anything below. Then after about 2 hours and 2 meters deep, they at last came across the bones of Peter Torot. It was also here that the special traditional rituals and ceremonies were conducted to exhume the bones.
Sila ground ni kulos tulong. Sila ngat nangkut membay sawali ko ni Ted nang burgin punkin. Tok lalim na sawal. Wala lim lang anam babay punya slip straight.
John, sorry, you've been planning Peter Torot.
Min bin planim. Min serap dal tamik plek hari mikam andap na ikam stab. Nalong ngolia em kantre timak no kantre kampente ya. Bante mbrundal lang kami miskulo misinuna popem. Telo.
Torot was buried at Tawulabong, the church graveyard at Rakunai.
Mi play. Mi play sindaun bantem get long pelet. Ara male taongo. Na all man only make him passing blomi palalong yan ya only broke him tambu. Na only sindaun bantem.
The son of a chief, Torot's fame and reputation grew and spread far and wide, not because he was the son of a chief, but rather because of his faith and gallantry to stand up for what he believed to be right.
E mama blemi sa story ol semtok. Papa e van pelagut pelamantru. E mi ken luki mol visitors oli kalong house in na pasi one plus something long on. E must give him something. Look lo mani bo compound long road e must kisi me kam long house. Kokim kai give me mem. Ino na long cross long holman lo peles no gatru. And walk belong in tasol or walk loto.
Olita kim mem, you know can make him loto long old man. Kristo in number 10. Japan good number 1. Torot in back him. Kristo in number 1. Japan in number 2.
The same people had given separate testimonies in the first ever preliminary inquiry. That preliminary report was a prelude to the proper inquiry, commissioned in 1985 by the Archbishop of Rabaul, Albert Wunderwood. Father Lucio Di Stefano was the postulator, the man appointed to head the inquiry.
A church inquiry which has to establish in case of the confessor, that he lived a holy life. The church inquiry, in case of martyrs, has to establish with clear, full evidence that this man or this woman has been murdered, has been killed because of his faith. This is what has happened with Peter Torot.
The report he compiled remained a private document. All information about the martyrdom of Peter Torot are documented.
And the tribunal, between January and March of 1987, questioned 16 people, mainly people from Rakunai village, including members of Peter Torot's family, members of Rakunai village, three fellow catechists of Peter Torot, and in particular 3 fellow prisoners of Peter Torot. 3 people who were detained with Peter Torot in Vunayara prison by the Japanese, and among these 3 I have to mention one in particular, a certain To Vaninara.
In 1993, the Holy See accepted the fact, and the Pope declared Peter Torot venerable and a martyr. In June of the same year, the Catholic bishops of Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands went on the ad limina visit to Rome. During that visit, Archbishop Michael Meyer, in his capacity as chairman of the Catholic Bishops' Conference, formally invited the Pope to visit Papua New Guinea.
We, the bishops of the Episcopal Conference of Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, on our ad limina, we ask Your Holiness to come to Rabaul in Papua New Guinea next year.
Father Rokus Tatamai hails from Rakonai village and is a direct descendant of Angela Topuya, who's the father of Peter Torot. Topuya did not refuse his son Torot from going to the catechist school, and as if to prophesy, he said only that one day one of his descendants may rise to the priesthood. Father Rokus Tatamai is a nephew of Peter Torot 2 generations over. And over a half century later, Father Rokus was ordained priest and so fulfilled that prophecy. This is the very location where you first conducted your mass after ordination.
Yes, it is. It was really an historic spot for me because firstly, he is a close relative of mine. So I call him to be a grandfather to me because I was very close, and somehow in our documentaries with the histories of this man, there was some reference to a priest in the family.
And how do you feel to be in that position?
I find it myself quite a big experience to find myself in the family, to be one of the close relative of Peter Torot, and also to be able to carry on what he was trying to live for, the ideals that he has, especially as a leader for his people and inspiration for the people in their faith, and particularly in the difficult times of the war and the trying times for his people. He was really here with the people, and he kind of supported them, encouraged them, and that for me is an inspiration.
Now I'm wampla pupu blong silbik mani mystery long enam Father Rokus ya.
No. Miama mas. Longan na mikisi mo bag like kukuti malong. Leg blong ni sana banda lahat blong Peter Torot. Sem na miama mas. Ulu titik tapi saya kan because I'm mas sila. And all time me. Kaya la walk blong do. We repeat him back sa walk of them blong, make him strong in young pulam blong. Betul lah Rokus. Big man.
That is a big honor for the people. Particularly, I see it as very important because then it's an encouragement to the people themselves that no matter who you are, where you are at, the fulfillment of your Christian life, that's what counts. And particularly when I see that the Holy Father recognizes Peter Torot for his life and his witness to his work and to his faith, that is really an encouragement and a strengthening point for the people themselves when they can actually relate with him, they can identify with him, that no matter where they are at, they can still fulfill their faith and also to witness, particularly under really hard and trying circumstances.
The remains of Peter Torot will lie in a shrine at the Rakunai Memorial Church, and while he will be long remembered for his deeds and martyrdom, his killers, the two Japanese officers Meshida and Gunto, will remain secluded in the folds of the history books.
These two Japanese Japanese police were tried in Rabaul in 1946, between 1946 and 1948, were tried by an international tribunal. And we also know for historical sources that they were condemned to 15 years of prison. We also know from historical sources that at first, within the trial, they said that they didn't know nothing about Peter Torot, but then, pressure by the public prosecutor, they confessed that they killed Peter Torot, and this is what they said, because there was too much Cristo. There was too much Cristo.
Too much Cristo, 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 too much Cristo. I am your catechist. I will do my duty, even if it cost me my very life. Too much Cristo, 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 too much Cristo.